Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Frank Sohn and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. Today, I'm excited to welcome Daniel Kube, CEO of servicePath. servicePath is a CPQ vendor headquartered in Toronto, Canada, specializing in CPQ solutions for technology vendors and managed service providers. Daniel brings nearly 30 years of business experience to the table, and before joining servicePath in 2016, he held various leadership roles in both startups and large corporations. Very excited to have him. Welcome to the CPQ podcast, Daniel.
Thanks, Frank. Nice to be here.
Excited to have you. And let's start with this. So before you joined servicePath in 2016, what did you do until then? And why did you join them anyway?
So as mentioned, I've been in the past 20 years, I've been in enterprise B2B SaaS. And I've been fortunate enough to have some exits that have afforded me to, have some patience. And when I'm making decisions about what I do next, to perch and look for the right opportunity. And so I had recently exited one of my companies, and I finished all my to-do lists, all my projects at the house and at the cottage, and started looking for the next opportunity where I could go build. I have a real passion for building anything, be it a house, be it a company, building people. And I met Mike and Ian, the two founders, and was really impressed with what they had managed to do with the organization, and land these huge organizations as customers and have a really deep understanding of some very specific verticals where there were some real challenges in the configure price quote space. And since then, it's been sort of just off to the races.
Excellent. And I think you initially planned to pursue a career in social work, but that all worked out a little bit differently than planned, right? So tell me more about that and why you changed your career.
So it's a bit different. So my career early stage was kind of like the family circus cartoon. Have you ever seen the kid on the playground going to all the different toys? So that was kind of my career path. But when I was in university, I actually volunteered as a suicide counselor, because it's important to give back. And I was doing, my degree. When I graduated from my university, that's just when the first NAFTA agreement was signed. And in Canada, as in the West Coast, as in British Columbia, and in Canada, a lot of the branch plants from the United States had actually closed in Canada because then they could centralize operations and get economies of scale, which made absolute sense. But as a result, there was a significant unemployment rate in Canada. So I actually didn't go through school. I had a degree in sociology and doing stuff in economics. I had my Canadian securities, things like that. And my intent was to go into finance. But I think the unemployment rate was just insane. And interestingly enough, my suicide counseling skills were the ones that got me a job. No one was hiring in banking. No one was hiring in finance. And I actually met this girl from Montreal. So I packed up my Toyota Land Cruiser, moved to Montreal, still didn't have a job, was moving furniture, looking for finance jobs. And I just started applying for jobs all over the place. Because of my suicide counseling skills, I managed to get a job with Metro Toronto Social Services, basically in the welfare department, helping people get off assistance, career counseling, all that kind of stuff. And ultimately ended up managing the largest homeless shelter at the time in North America, this place called Seton House. Very quickly came to the realization, I didn't go to school to do this, but it was great because, I got to give back. And inadvertently, while I was still working at Seton House, I went back and did a post-grad in Asian business. And if you remember in the 90s, that was when, the Asian dragons were taking off. So I ultimately did an internship with the Consulate of Malaysia, doing trade analysis. And then I got picked up at that time by Coopers & Lybrand, who you'll remember, who now became PwC. I'm doing trade analysis, and I started doing joint venture tech transfer deals in Southeast Asia. And interestingly enough, I still moonlighted at the homeless shelter on nights and weekends because it was a 24-hour operation. Did that for like 5 years and did both jobs, career saving for a first house. And that launched me into basically enterprise SaaS. I got recruited from PwC to go work for a company in Boston called Iona Technologies. At that time was a really hot middleware company. And then it was basically off to the races, and then went to a company called Actuate, where I launched the first SaaS application for them, which was really interesting. From one of the companies, they actually had acquired our company, Performance Soft, and though that would begin the sort of progression into high tech and international business.
Well, man, I have to tell you that's one of the most interesting stories I heard, right? So, and going back and forth between these different things, very exciting, very cool. And you're also, you're obviously the CEO of ServicePath, right? You're also an investor, board member. You have a family, right? So lots of different priorities dragging you in different directions. How do you manage to be fair to everyone here?
Well, I think it's part of it's my ADHD, the fact that I need to be doing something, bouncing around. I'm not very good at sitting still. That can be a challenge. It's a blessing and a curse, as you know. So I enjoy doing lots of different things. And unfortunately, I'm also dyslexic. So context switching and things like that are kind of like something I'm very used to. So jumping from a board meeting to a customer problem or issue or an investment, it's all normal in the course of the day. I mean, the lion's share of my energy is devoted to ServicePath. And then on the side, I still believe it's important to give back by doing board work and helping build the next wave of entrepreneurs. Like that's really important for us. Because I remember how hard it was when I was getting started.
Yep, yep. And one thing I was particularly interested in is so since you also work as an investor, right? So you're also looking obviously potentially for investors at ServicePath at some point, right? So, but what do you look for as an investor in a company that you're investing in?
Yeah, so I've been since I guess my first exit, I guess every exit you try to reinvest something in the future of the next wave of businesses. And one of my sort of profiles is I believe in investing in companies where I believe I can help them with either introductions or market understanding. But really, you're right. Absolutely, the thing you look for to me is the team that's running the organization. Because having been in the trenches doing it, things generally speaking don't go to plan. So you need resilience, you need tenacity, and you need the ability to think about shifting on the fly or changing context because markets can change, ideas can be wrong, validations can be wrong. So, that's really hard to find early on, especially when you're investing in young entrepreneurs. But so then you go back to some of those skills do not necessarily manifest themselves immediately, especially in an early stage opportunity with a first time entrepreneur. So then you look at things, for example, like coachability. Will this person listen to good advice? And also, will this person say no, right? I would argue in a lot of cases, early stage investors are really bad for the entrepreneur because they don't have alignment to the industry. They think their context will add a lot of value. However, it's probably very wrong. So, the ability for that person to also think about the advice they're getting and say no is an important skill. So, I mean, those are some of the really high level ones, but tenacity for sure. And, as you know, it's hard building a business.
And what kind of career advice would you give anyone with a social background, right? So these days, anyway, anything that comes to mind? Anyone who wants to transition from more social background to an economic background?
Early in my career, I think one of if I look at the things that benefited me the most, a mentorship from people, I always try to align myself because, there's always someone smarter about something than you are. There's always someone who has a better experience or a different perspective. So I think, that's what I try to get my kids to listen to me about. Sometimes they don't, but that's, I think, something that's really helped me accelerate. And later on in your career, I think, it's important to give back. And also, one of the things when you talk about angel investing or early stage investing or early fund investing is great from doing it. But one of the great things about it as well is you get energy and new ideas from all the presentations you see, right? You also begin to understand new market trends because when you're so close to the coal face, running your business, dealing with all the challenges, sometimes you lose that, 26,000 foot perspective that's really important to see things that are coming. So back to that advice stage. So, when you're later in your career, you want to do a pivot or a switch. There's all sorts of great incubators, startup, think tanks, those where you can go, volunteer and you get as much out basically as you give. So I call it perching, go find the right opportunity, get involved in the ecosystem, try to find some people you can add value to. And, also make sure, entrepreneurship's not for everyone, especially early stage. But, for those who do love it, I mean, you wouldn't do anything else.
No, I think that that's very good advice, right? So, but now let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about service paths, right? So, and I wanted to see from you, from your point of view, what did you think was the original vision behind service path when you joined, and how has that evolved over time now?
So, ServicePath has a really interesting story. So, Mike and Ian both came from the managed services provider space. And that doesn't sound like it's a big deal. But in the context of when they founded the company and started building the application, so they basically, during the day, were doing MSP consulting to fund Ian and the development team to go build the platform. And Mike and Ian had both come from the managed services space, which was great. So they understood the challenges of MSPs. And if you roll the tape back 12 years ago, MSPs 12 years ago were dealing with things called hosting, very similar to private cloud. They were dealing with all sorts of vendors because, all these MSPs were selling different products, services, hardware, you name it, telephones, even at that point in time, and creating all these different solution sets together. The challenge was all this was in Excel, and prices and configurations were constantly changing, right? So one of the things that Mike and Ian identified initially, because Mike had bought SAP and I think Oracle, their predecessors to their CPQ products way back, wasted millions of dollars. They had to write off the investment. And he also said, the other thing that drove him nuts was you had to line up to get tech to make any changes or configurations to the platform. Right. So one of our fundamental beliefs when we started ServicePath, and Mike and Ian started it, I joined 8 years later, was the fact that it had to be codeless. The business unit or the users of the solution and the system had to be able to build products, be able to manage the implementation without having to involve IT, because IT is great, right? But the challenge with IT, especially at the enterprise layer, is they finish your project and then they move on to the next series of projects. And there's, a project plan to everything they do. So if you need to change your system at any point, you have to queue up to make sure you can get those resources. And a lot of that long-term planning does not go into enterprise, deployments of software, as you know, and results in, that's one of the big reasons why projects fail. So I call it, the death spin, of a project. So, once a CPQ gets out of date or starts getting out of date, the salespeople stop using it, they revert to spreadsheets. So that fundamental problem we tried to solve really, really early. The other interesting aspect or silo that emerged out of it was because these MSPs were standing up very significant investments up front. So they're having to buy a lot of kit, a lot of hardware to deliver a solution, especially as organizations began to evolve into the sort of software as a service world, consumption-based models. MSPs had to understand what were their cost build outs so they could understand, were they actually making a really good deal, or were they going to lose money over the 5 or 10-year term of that contract? So rolling the tape backward, that whole concept of cost of serve has always been built into the platform, which is important because now as a service world, it's really important to understand when you're launching a service, especially if you're trying to make a big investment, how are we going to recover our costs, right? And most CPQs didn't build that inherently. It was just P times Q, simple modeling. So that's really given a lot of our customers, especially the ones who solve really large, complex solutions, a lot of peace of mind that when they have a deal dashboard that can tell them the payback, the IRR, the MPV on that deal, or they can toggle it to understand the different consumption models if they change the prepay, so on and so forth, to make sure they're making a sound financial decision. Because getting a quote out in CPQ fast is really important. But it's equally or more important to make sure it's a good deal for the business, because otherwise it can sink you. So, those were two fundamental tenets that we started and continue today. So interestingly enough, you roll the tape forward 10 years, now all of our MSP-like constructs are now very similar to all the constructs of any tech-enabled enterprise. Companies are selling consumption models. They want to worry about their cost of serve. They're selling heterogeneous solutions, combining all these different products together. There's different pricing calculations, different configuration calculations. So the beauty of it, that's why you're beginning to see us take off. That's why you're seeing us, to really get embraced by the analyst community, because all these features that we thought were only really useful for MSPs 10 years ago, that embedded knowledge that we built into the platform is useful for, mid-sized to major enterprises everywhere.
And that brings up the next question, right? And that's more about the customers that you're trying to reach, right? So how would you define the three top groups of customers that you serve?
Yeah, so from a geographic perspective, we're on 5 continents now. We have staff on 4. So, all the way from Asia, Australia to Latin America, Caribbean. Our fastest growing market is still North America. As you know, when I first joined the organization, we had very limited penetration here. Europe's always been, a big stalwart for us. So I would say between Europe and North America, that's probably, 90% of our business, those 2 markets. But, Asia Pac has actually done relatively well for us. Where the markets that we focus on, we started off really in the managed services space or big tech. We've always had Dell as a big anchor customer of ours, which has been great. But we've begun to evolve because of those attributes. The common attributes that we had in the MSP days are now being consumed. And so now, I can't say the name because we don't have rights to disclose it, but we've won one of the largest financial services institutions globally. And just because they have that same pattern in usage consumption. We were in health tech. We're, getting in. One of our customers is a company called Tarkett, which is interesting. So they have all these crazy, if you know anything about them, they're the world's largest producer of turf. So they manage 27,000 stadiums globally. So they have this huge deployment arm, that's huge field services program. So all these things, and when you're building a stadium full of turf, you absolutely need pricing precision, right? Because those are really tight contracts.
Now that's a really interesting example. I think we discussed that before, right? So, but very interesting example. But ServicePath has grown quite a bit over the last couple of years. I think when I first started talking to you and Mike, that's probably now, I have an idea, a bunch of years ago, right? 8, 9. Anyway, so it has been a while, right? So
I think when we first started talking, we were like 10-ish people. Now we're north of, almost 100-ish.
If you have any questions around CPQ, contact us at info@novocpq.com. Here are just 2 examples on how NovoCPQ Consulting can help you to get better and more information sooner. So the first one is our industry analyst report called the CPQ Sales Report. We have currently 3 reports available and have the goal of having much more available pretty soon. This is a detailed report about one vendor, which shows all the details you would like to know in a 15 to 20 page report. It has lots of different information about investors, capabilities in the tool, preconditions, what CRM and ERP solutions the solution typically integrates with, and much more. So that should be a very helpful report, especially when you try to select the CPQ solution. And as I said, there will be much more soon. Our other offering is the CPQ Circle subscription, which is a monthly newsletter that tells you about what's happening in the CPQ world, what events are going on, and what are the current trends that you can see in the industry. And it comes also with a number of hours that different subscribers use different ways. So if you have any questions about one of these 2, the CPQ sales report or our CPQ Circle subscription, shoot a quick message to info@novocpq.com. Now, you already mentioned a couple of things, but if you would bring it down to 1 or 2 points to really explain to someone why you think that is a unique solution, because that's not easy, right? So there are over 150 CPQ solutions out there. For anyone to claim they are unique is kind of a risky statement, but why do you think that ServicePath is unique?
Well, when I say unique, I think we're unique for specific markets. There's markets where we don't play, and not because we don't play. We've managed to we do have some manufacturing customers, but they came to us not because of our ability to deal with CAD/CAM files. They came to us because of our ability to deal with real complexity and pricing precision and cost precision. If discrete manufacturing is not a market for us, anyone in the technology service or tech-enabled business space, that's absolutely our sweet spot, because the features and functions in the product help enable faster building of solutions to enable organizations to get to market really quickly, right? Part of that's because of the use model. We want to make sure it's codeless, but we make sure a product manager can build products quickly. And that's really important, especially in tech-enabled businesses, because the rate of change is so high, right? You need to be able to get new solutions out to market quickly. And I would argue because we really are an engineering-led company, we're really light on sales and marketing and heavy on engineering. We've never met a pricing scenario we could not understand, address, or build a solution for. And part of that is because we're constantly launching really cool new technologies that enable more great stuff to happen. I think in about 2 months, I'll be able to share something super cool that you'll be really excited by. That one of the attributes or commonalities of the customers that we have are they're generally PE-backed organizations, and they're highly acquisitive, right? So one of the reasons why, so we have a high footprint of some of the largest PE firms in the world, like KKR, Apollo, you name it. And one of the attributes of a PE-based organization is they want to get that velocity and standardization of pricing and understanding and insight as fast as possible. But the other thing that PE-backed firms do is they do a lot of acquisitions. And to get synergy from those acquisitions faster is super, super important. So those are some of the things that we're working on, really excited. And back to that point, where do we believe we play? We really love the concept of RLM, revenue lifecycle management. But we believe no mid-size or enterprise organization is going to do a rip and replace RLM. So our approach has always been best of breed. We believe in a really strong integration layer so we can play with other components or launch other components ourselves to integrate with other solutions. So, it's those sort of players. If someone's looking for a full stack, because some organizations want a stack, right? They only want to deal with one vendor. They don't want to tune it. And they also, if you have the right tech team and a lot of developers, you can support any application. And some organizations support that really, really well. But I would argue, for example, Salesforce, unless it's well supported, can be really problematic in complex quoting. Same with Conga. And that's where we sort of pick these deals up when we see them fail and we get those calls.
Got it. Then let me ask one question, because the Gartner Magic Quadrant report just came out, right? So, and then I thought, okay, I also ask you what this report and similar reports from the larger industry analysts like IDC and Forrester, what does it do for you when you're mentioned in these reports, and how does it help your customers?
Well, I think anyone at the enterprise, they want to see an analyst report because it's a source of third-party independent review. For us, we don't pay any of the analysts anything. We've been invited to brief them, and we've been doing so, as you know, for a couple of years. We're actually really happy with Gartner, just because Gartner's actually helped us be better. The Gartner process, I would argue, is probably the most rigorous one we have to go through because it's a very standardized approach. And Mark Lewis, he's a good guy, but he's also a really hard marker, and he's very firm, and he is very binary. Like, if it doesn't do it, like, he doesn't waste his time. He just moves on. And, and that's allowed us every year to keep on focusing and understanding based on his knowledge where the market's going and things that we can continue to improve. So we think it's useful. It's great validation for our customers, as is IDC and a lot of the others, because many people subscribe to different ones. But, we think, one, it keeps us honest, because, the analysts are constantly looking about where the trends, asking the hard questions about, can you do this? Can you support this? Specifically in the MQ that just came out, like, we share that we're alone now in the visionary quadrant because they dropped Salesforce CPQ. I think it's called Salesforce Vertical Industries now, the button that's above us in the leader quadrant. But, we continually are strengthening our position. And, we're hoping with some of the things that I'm mentioning, that I'm foreshadowing this year, are going to be really exciting and well perceived and picked up. Some really cool functionality no one else has, in conjunction with our continued build out of the integration layer, which, you should see an announcement coming out probably in the next 2 weeks.
Excellent. And let's talk especially about the pricing part, right? So, and I don't want to go into all the pricing capabilities. I just want to know 2 or 3 things that you're especially proud of in the pricing area that you think are worth mentioning here in the podcast.
So, pricing precision is important, and pricing, as you know, so we really pride ourselves in the ability to quote solutions. Solutions are a composite of a whole bunch of products combined together, right? Each one of those individual inputs are basic products, as we put it. Think of it as an atom, right? And each atom is combined with something to create a molecule. Can have different attributes, pricing, discounting rules, discounting logic, different rate cards. So, and that can be hidden or totally open to the customer, right? Because if you're sometimes creating a solution, you want the customer to understand all the different inputs. But sometimes, because you're creating something that's proprietary that you mark up, You don't want the customer to understand that, but you want them to understand what is that output or per unit or cost per milliwatt or cost for whatever. So that precision is everywhere in the product. And that is also married with the cost of serve analysis, right? So the price is what we mark up, but we also understand the inherent cost. So one of the things that we get mentioned in the Gartner report for is our deal dashboard. So the deal dashboard allows the executive or the sales operations team to look at the exact forecast of what those prices are on the product, how they actually map to the GL, but more importantly, the cost constructs related to the inputs. So what that means is you can actually map the cost or the inputs or the consumables by GL and do that for demand forecasting. So you can say, based on our forecast at 90%, how many blade servers do we have to come? Do we have those in the warehouse? Do we have to go order them? Is there inventory globally for this stuff? And when you're talking about a large deal, that's also talking about not only ordering them, do we have the capital to support this deal, right? In a big deal, that can make a big difference. A lot of our customers are so large, like billion-dollar entities, but even for them, they have to be careful about some big deals. They can put you underwater.
Perfect. Very good. So then I think the next question I have is probably a little bit related to that. But in general, AI is talked about now for at least 2 years since ChatGPT announced their availability, right? So, but how do you use it in CPQ and how do you use it?
So, yeah, great question. So something that we're working on currently. So we use it operationally and organizationally across all the different departments, right? Because it's increasing our productivity. It's allowing us to question stuff, find stuff out, develop new markets. So from a marketing perspective, from an engineering perspective, and we use a myriad of different tools. From an input perspective in the product, we're experimenting with different pilots, using it like for pricing. One of our challenges is the confidence in AI and things, for example, like hallucination. So if you start doing this stuff, so we know we actually have full audit trails in our platform that enable someone to look at how the quote was changed, how it was done, how did it come up, who changed it, who approved it, for example. When you start abstracting that out and using an AI engine, the potential risks are high right now. We're just trying to figure out the best way for that so we can give our customers the confidence that they don't have to worry about the accuracy and the precision of leveraging those tools. So
and how much interest do you see from customers in that topic anyway, in regard to CPQ?
I think at the enterprise layer, it's because they have so many legacy systems all over the place, and for them to get a legacy system to work with a new Gen AI, I think they're not as all over it. There's still skepticism about the fear, but I think the excitement's real. We're really excited about it. We think it's awesome. We're just trying to figure out how we best deploy it. Like we have a bunch of use cases we have identified and we're currently exploring. Not only, and we really like the concept related to an agent, and not only an agent like doing a configuration, but think about a pre-sales agent when you're doing an implementation. Think about an agent at the integration layer. So that's one of the things we'll probably be announcing in the next couple of weeks from an integration perspective, because these are things that will make it easy, right? Our goal is to give really super high degrees of accuracy and confidence in the quotes and get them out quickly. And more importantly, because as you know, at the enterprise layer or any big deal, no one accepts the first quote. You want to have that same velocity and trust and governance in the second revision and the third and fourth and fifth revision. So you can beat your competitors. Because, the data is pretty sound, right? Whoever gets the first quote out generally has a higher degree of winning. Like they say, it's 50% or more. But first quotes generally are not accepted. So, if you're really slow in your second quote, it's not going to help. You need to be fast on that. The other thing, also, one of the big differentiators as well for our customers, I forgot to mention, is our concept of service contracts. And just think of service contracts as your install base, everything you've sold to that customer before, not only the pricing, but also how it's been configured. Because when you have a big enterprise customer and you have a long-term relationship with them, sometimes that information is really hard to find. And that's one thing that we offer that's also really differentiated over our competitors.
Got it. And are there any events in the next 3 to 6 months where our listeners have a chance to see the servicePath team in person and experience the solution themselves? Is there anything you want to share now?
So we're looking at a couple of the Gartner events, for example. Right now we're in discussions with them. And we go to some of the big conferences in the UK and North America. I forget, like Cloud Fest or these different ones. We have a list. We actually have been kind of lightweight on attending events, but we also believe, this year we want to amp up the events because we believe one of the challenges right now with AI, everyone's getting great content from everywhere, right? And I think people crave, face to face, just like you said, because you're getting overwhelmed with content, but how do you, filter it?
Yep.
And I think sometimes a face-to-face meeting is one of the best ways.
Hey, I think that was super interesting. Unfortunately, we're coming already to the end of this episode. Hence, my last question was a good way for interested listeners to contact you if they have any follow-up questions for you.
Yeah. I mean, Daniel.Kube at servicepath.co, which is great, or reach out on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, posting a lot of stuff, weekly basis. Yeah, we're really excited. I mean, we love, dealing with hard stuff and helping organizations make it simple. Frank, yeah. Anyways, really appreciate it, Frank, and thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.